John Cullen, a forgotten hero from the American tapestry. Now, if it wasn't for his actions, Nazi saboteurs could have wreaked havoc in America during World War II. Now, the true story of bosun mate, second class John Cullen's United States Coast Guard. Around 12:45 a.m. Saturday, June 13, 1942, U-202, a Type 7C U-boat of the German Navy, surfaced off of Amagansett Beach on the coast of Long Island, New York. Now, the dense fog limited visibility between 15 and 20 feet. The night was pitch black. Anybody on shore looking out to sea would be staring into a wall of fog, not realizing just 250 yards offshore, a Nazi U-boat was landing 4 saboteurs on American soil. Now, on board the surface U-boat, a group of seamen were preparing the rebel boat to be launched. U-202's captain, Hans Lintner, held a last-minute briefing with the 4 saboteurs. The question came up, what should be done if we run into a beach patrol? Lintner's response, overpower the patrol by force, then take the patrol back to the submarine. With that last instruction given, the 2 seamen and the 4 saboteurs began paddling to shore about 250 yards away. The sea was rough and the waves were tossing the rebel boat all around, but they made it to the beach without any major incidents except for being soaking wet from the waves. Operation Pistorius had reached America's shores. Okay, a quick overview of Operation Pistorius would be helpful at this point. Now, back in September 1941, 33 members of the Nazi German espionage network called the Duquesne Spy Ring were put on trial for espionage in New York City's federal court. All 33 were convicted of espionage on December 13, 1941. These convictions delivered the death blow to Nazi Germany's espionage efforts in the United States. And Hitler was pissed, to say the least. So, Hitler ordered Admiral William Canaris, head of the German military intelligence, which was called the Abwehr, to send saboteurs to America. Canaris realized it was a fool's errand. However, it would have been useless to say that to Hitler. So, he placed a gentleman by the name of Walter Kapp in charge of recruiting the spies and preparing them for their mission. Kapp was a typical Nazi. Now, Kapp chose 8 men who spoke English and had lived in the United States for a period of years. However, his vetting process left a lot to be desired. 2 of his recruits were less than enthusiastic about the Hitler regime. They just wanted to get back to America any way they could. Now, these 8 men were put through an intensive 3-week training program. They were instructed in the use of explosives, incendiaries, primers, multiple forms of mechanical, chemical, and electrical delayed timing devices. Now, in contrast, the OSS, that's the Office of Strategic Service, that's America's spy agency, their training program lasted 10 weeks. Okay, the mission was given the code name Operation Pistorius, as I said. But why Pistorius? What's the significance? Well, you see, there was this guy by the name of Francis Daniel Pistorius, the organizer of the first settlement of Germans in America in 1618. He named the settlement Germantown, which is now present-day Germantown, Pennsylvania. Yeah, not too subtle to say the least. But to be fair, the U.S. military did the same thing about 20 years later with Operation Ortsack. That was the plan to invade Cuba during the October 62 Cuban Missile Crisis. Ortsack is Castro spelled backwards. Gotta hand it to military intelligence. Alright, anyways, the 8 saboteurs. Now, 4 were to be landed on Point Verde Beach in Florida, and 4 would be landed at Amagansett Beach in Long Island. The mission was to sabotage American economic targets. That means hydroelectric plants, aluminum companies, chemical companies, crucial railroad junctions, and the agents were also instructed to spread terror throughout the country. They were to plant explosives on bridges, railroad stations, water facilities, public places like parks, Jewish-owned shops, go into bus stations, plant bombs into the lockers. They wanted to spread terror. Okay, now they were given everything a spy would need to be a success. Counterfeit birth certificates, social security cards, draft deferment cards, driver's license, and $180,000 in American money. That would be approximately $3,300,000 in 2024 money. Well, as soon as the 8 saboteurs landed on Amagansett Beach, things went sideways extremely fast. Now, whenever the story is told, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI take all the credit. Hoover comes off looking like the always vigilant protector of America and her freedoms. In fact, the real hero of this story is 21-year-old Coast Guardman, Petty Officer 3rd Class, John C. Cullen. Now, approximately 6 months out of boot camp, Cullen was assigned to the Coast Guard Life-Saving Station at Amagansett, Long Island, doing, among other things, the beach patrol. That was walking a section of beach, seeing what was going on out there. Now, to accomplish their mission, the men were armed with a flashlight. Yep, that's right, a flashlight. Maybe a whistle if they were lucky. A side note here, after this incident, the Coast Guard did beef up the patrols with a security force of armed men, guard dogs, horse patrols, and in some cases, radios. Alright, anyways, back to the story. The Amagansett Life Saving Station was responsible for patrolling a 12-mile section of beach, 6 miles to the east, 6 miles to the west. Now at that point, the patrol would meet up with a similar patrol from the next life saving station down the way, and then that single-man patrol would turn around and head back to their station. Now there was usually a watchtower placed somewhere in that patrol area, probably about the 3-mile mark. Okay, so we left off with the Nazi saboteurs landing on Amagansett Beach about 1 a.m. June 13, 1942. Now George Dash, the leader of the saboteurs, steadied the rubber boat, gave orders for the 3 other men to grab the gear and get on the beach and start stashing it. George Dash, the leader of the Nazi saboteurs, steadied the rubber boat and gave orders for the other 3 men to grab the gear, get on the beach and stash it. Now Dash headed to the top of the dunes to reconnoiter the situation. Now Dash's men, there was Ernst Peter Berger, Heinrich Hahn Henrich, and Richard Queren, moved the equipment to the fence at the bottom of the dunes. Now that's where they started changing out of their naval clothes and burying the 4 boxes of explosives and the sea bags. 50 minutes earlier, Petty Officer 3rd Class Jack C. Cullen began his patrol. Now Cullen was part of the Beach Pounders. These are the men who walked the coastline 6 miles out and 6 miles back. On this particular night, Jack would stare death in the face. Armed only with a flashlight, Cullen stepped out into the pitch dark and pea soup foggy night. His visibility was about 15 to 20 feet. Barely half a mile down the beach, Cullen spotted a dark object. It was about 20 feet away in the water. So, walking towards the object, he flashed his light on it, but to no avail. Fog was impenetrable. Closing in further, he noticed the object turned into 3 people standing in the water just up over their ankles. Now this would be Dash and the 2 sailors from the U-boat. Okay, before I go any further, the dialogue you're going to hear comes directly from the testimony, which I'll put a link in the description below where you can find the testimony of everybody involved in this. Okay, Collins hollered out, "Who are you?" Now George Dash approached Cullen. In the darkness and the fog, Cullen was unaware of the other 3 Nazi agents by the beach fence. They were behind him. So Peter Berger was halfway between the fence and the water's edge when he heard Cullen ask again, "Who are you?" Okay, now this is where the facts get a little confused. Cullen's testimony before the military tribunal stated, "I asked him who he was, and he approached me and he said, 'Coast Guard?'" Now, Dash's statement given to the FBI after he was arrested is a little different. He said, he asked me, "What are you doing here? What's up here?" Dash arrogantly replied, "What do you care what's up here? We got lost. We left East Hampton to go down to Montauk Point, and we got lost." Cullen said, "What do you mean East Hampton and Montauk Point? Do you know where you are?" Now again, this is Dash's version. He's very arrogant when he's relaying this. "Well, I think you should know. "Where is your station?" Now Cullen responded, "It's right up there. My station's Amagansett." Cullen's testimony about the exchange was a little different. He portrayed Dash as more circumspect, more obsequious, basically. So here's what Cullen saying in his testimony. "I asked him who he was. Dash said, 'We are a couple of fishermen from Southampton and ran ashore here.' Then I asked him what the trouble was. He said they ran aground. Then Dash said, 'Well, we'll stay here until sunrise. Then we'll be all right.'" Now, Collins told him, "Look, buddy, it's 4 hours until then. There's no reason why you should not come up to the station and stay there." Now, Dash hesitates a moment and then says, "All right." So Cullen and Dash walk about 5 feet when Dash stops and faced Cullen. He said, "I'm not going with you. We don't have any papers of identification or permit to fish." Now, Collins insisted that he had to come along at this point. Things didn't look right. Dash refused again. Now, it was at this point that Cullen tried to grab Dash's arm. Dash realized he had only 2 options to deal with Collins. Now, he could follow his orders and overpower Collins and then send him out to the U-boat with the sailors. But God knows what would have happened to Collins then. A POW camp in Germany, if he was lucky. Or he could try offering a bribe. Okay, so Collins is grabbing Dash's elbow. Dash blurts out, "Now wait a minute, you don't know what this is all about." Collins says, "No, I don't." Dash asked Collins how old he was and if he had a mother and father. Collins said, "Yeah, I'm 21. I've got a mother and father." Now at this point, things get dicey for Collins and Dash. Dash said, "Well, I wouldn't want to have to kill you." Now while Dash was talking with Collins, Peter Berger had come up from behind Collins and said something in German to Dash. Dash immediately snapped back to Berger in English, "Damn fool, why don't you go back to the other guys?" He then turned around and shouted out to the 2 sailors in the water, "Get back where you came from." Now, Berger did rejoin Queren and Hennick at the beach fence. Now, when Berger told them what was going on, both men wanted to overpower Collins. Luckily for Collins, both Dash and Berger had decided long before they left France to turn themselves in to the authorities. So Berger was able to stop Queren and Hennick from moving on Collins by saying, "Look it, Dash is in charge here. He's got it under control. Leave it alone." Now, Dash still had a problem. How to convince Cullen to just walk away. His only option was a bribe. So Dash took Cullen by the arm and walked another 5 feet. Then he spoke. "Listen, forget about this and I will give you some money and you can have a good time." Dash offered him $100. Cullen said he didn't want it. Then Dash peeled off $300 and said, "Take this." Okay, now Collins had no choice. It was take the money and live, or refuse the bribe and possibly die. He took the money, but before he could disappear into the fog, Dash said one more thing. He said, "Wait a minute." Okay? Dash took off his hat and said, "Take a look at me. Look into my eyes. Look into my eyes. Look into my eyes." He said it 3 times. Then Dash put his hat back on and said, "I'll be meeting you in East Hampton sometime. Do you know me?" Now, Collins, being no fool, said, "No, sir. Never saw you before in my life." Dash let Cullen go. Now, in an interview for MaritimeExecutive.com, September 16, 2019, written by William Thiessen, Cullen stated, "I backed up most of the way. I didn't trust them. I didn't think I was going to get out of there." Then he later remembered, "I went up the sand dunes and ran like hell for the station." Now, Cullen made it back to the station as fast as he could running in the sand dunes. That was about 15 minutes. He reported the incident to bosun's mate 2nd class Carl Jeanette, and he showed him the cash. Jeanette's reaction was quick. His response was, "Oh boy, this is big." Jeanette got on the phone to relay Cullen's report to the station commander and the local Coast Guard commander. While he was doing that, he then told Cullen, "We'll break out some rifles. Now you don't have to come, but if you want to go," without hesitation, Collins replied, "I'm going." Now Jeanette and his small group of men, armed only with .30 caliber rifles, with Cullen leading the way, headed back to the location of the landing site. By the time they got back to the location, Cullen and the men found nothing. Dash and his 3 men had already disappeared into the night and fog. While the Coast Guard men were waiting for further orders, though, they could hear and vaguely make out a long dark shape in the waters offshore. Soon they could smell diesel fuel. German U-boat 202 was still out there. However, due to the fog and the pitch black night, the U-boat was able to get away before any naval ships could respond. Now by daylight, the men from the station had begun recovering the buried boxes and sea bags Dash and his men had hidden. So Hitler's sabotage plan had been foiled almost from the start. John Cullen should have been recognized as a hero for what happened that night, but no, that's not what happened. The following day, after the landing, Cullen was interrogated by the FBI. And Cullen said, "I was afraid the FBI thought I was somehow connected with the landing. Under ordinary circumstances, I should have been dead." Now, they couldn't understand why I hadn't been killed, and frankly, neither could I. So the story broke on June 28, 1942. As far as America was concerned, it was J. Edgar Hoover and his FBI that foiled the Nazi sabotage ring. Newspapers published Hoover's accounts of how the saboteurs were captured. There was never any mention of Jack Cullen and his encounter with the agents. For example, June 28th, Washington Evening Star headline stated, "FBI captures 8, landed by sub, thwarts spectacular Nazi plot to sabotage vital U.S. war plans." Now the truth as far as Hoover was concerned was whatever he decided it to be. Hoover was the hero of this story. It was through hard work, diligence, extraordinary investigative ability that Hoover and his agents were able to thwart the Nazi saboteurs so quickly. And no one dared challenge J. Edgar Hoover on this. Now, in reality, the case was handed to the FBI and Hoover on a silver platter. As I said, Dash had already decided to turn himself in, he and Berger. So on June 15th, Dash phoned the New York office of the FBI and explained the plot. Now, the agent answering the call refused to believe Dash's story. He thought he was a crank. Dash actually had to go to Washington, D.C., walk into FBI headquarters, and dump $84,000 in cash on Assistant Director D.M. Ladd's desk to get the FBI to take him seriously. 2 weeks later, all of the Nazi saboteurs were in FBI custody. Now, when Roosevelt was informed, he was furious that something like this could happen. He wanted those spies summarily executed. In a memo to Attorney General Francis Biddle, Roosevelt wrote, "I want one thing clearly understood, Francis. I won't hand them over to any U.S. Marshal armed with a writ of habeas corpus. Understand?" Roosevelt wanted a quick trial in the morning and an execution by noon. So what he had to do was sign an Executive Order 2561. This created a military tribunal to prosecute the German spies. Now this was signed on July 2nd, 1942. The tribunal opened on July 8, 1942. All 8 men were charged with violating the laws of war, violating Article 81 and 82 of the Articles of War. Now the trial ended on August 1st, 1942. 2 days later, all were found guilty and a sentence of death was delivered. Now, Roosevelt commuted Berger's sentence to life in prison and Dash's to 30 years because they had surrendered themselves and provided information about the others. The remaining 6 defendants, unfortunately, weren't so lucky. They were executed on the 8th of August, 1942 in the electric chair at the District of Columbia Jail. Their bodies were buried in Potter's Field in the Blue Plains neighborhood of Anacostia, Washington. Now, John Cullen would be recognized by the U.S. Coast Guard for his action on June 13, 1942, when he was awarded the Legion of Merit in October of 1943. The pertinent part of the award stated, "Boatswain's mate, second class Cullen, unarmed and helpless against their menacing threat, cleverly allayed their suspicions and thwarted their subversive intentions by promptly accepting a pro-offered bribe, then sounding the alarm that led to their eventual capture. Subsequently volunteering as a member of a search party, he remained on the beach all night. For his actions that night, Boatswain's Mate Second Class Cullen was promoted to Boatswain's Mate Third Class and awarded the Legion of Merit." For years, whenever this story was told, the only credit Cullen received was a footnote such as, "A Coast Guard man stumbled across saboteurs, pretended to take a bribe, then alerted his superiors to what happened." J. Edgar Hoover made sure the FBI took all of the credit. Cullen's actions that night should be recognized beyond he pretended to take a bribe and then alerted his superiors. Well, I hope you liked this video. Now if you did, hit that like button, ring the bell for the notifications, and please subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories from our past. Also, let me know what parts you found interesting. Leave a comment in the section below, or if you just have a question about the whole subject, ask that. I'll be answering it. And one more thing, it would really be great if you could share this video with your friends who also enjoy history. Well, thank you for watching.